Welcome to the pod focusing on the aftermath and recovery from the devastating Palisades fires of January 2025. Journalist Joel Pollock, entrepreneur Oren Ezra, and technology expert Ron Goldschmidt serve up to the moment vital news and information, discuss the ongoing recovery efforts, and introduce us to the individuals and trades who are playing key roles in rebuilding our cherished communities. We're diving into the deep end and learning quickly how we can move forward together. We know the pain because we're living real-time news, stories, resources, and insights on the ongoing recovery effort. Buckle up. We're three homeless guys.
Welcome to Three Homeless Guys, the podcast about the Palisades fire and the rebuilding effort. I'm Joel Pollock, a journalist here with you, along with my friends Oren Ezra, who is a great entrepreneur, and Ron Goldschmidt, who is a technology expert. And we are also joined on this very special episode by our neighbor, Nathan Miller, or Nate Miller. He is a seasoned diplomat and communications expert, and he's just the man for this episode where we're going to talk about foreign policy for the first time. Nate, we're going to do a brief introduction now, a fuller one later, but welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. I've been a long-time listener, excited to join the crew here.
Well, we're very glad to have you, and I am in the middle of moving temporarily across the country. Ron's going to be moving tomorrow. I guess he'll talk about that in a second. But actually, I was not supposed to be in the country. I was supposed to be in Israel. I'm here in Chicago, or suburban Chicago, more precisely. But I was supposed to be in Israel. My flight was canceled because this little war broke out. I guess the war was already happening, but the direct war between Israel and Iran erupted on Thursday evening, local time here. I guess it was early Friday morning in Israel. And on Friday morning, they canceled the journalistic trip I was supposed to be on. I was actually supposed to be interviewing Ambassador Mike Huckabee yesterday, which would be Monday, and that didn't happen. It'll happen eventually, but I'm glad to be here. I got to spend Father's Day at home instead of in a bomb shelter, so that was, I guess, was pretty good. But let's talk a little bit about the news. We'll get to the foreign policy stuff in a second. The big news this week in the Palisades is the removal of the police checkpoints. And I don't really know what's going on. I'm not on the ground at the moment, so it's hard to see. But I've heard lots of different stories about this. What's interesting to me is that the local residents appear to want more police enforcement of minor traffic infractions. Before, it seemed to be the California Highway Patrol that was coming down pretty hard on people. And now that they've removed the checkpoints, I saw some messages from locals saying they want these rolling stops and strict speed limits and all of that to be enforced because they want to keep people out of the Palisades who shouldn't be there. I know Ron might have some opinions about that. Ron, I know you've had a particular issue with this. What do you think of all that?
My speeding tickets are piling up. As I said, it's a line item on my budget. I just think the speed limits are ridiculous. I think like 25 miles an hour is just almost undrivable. I feel like the checkpoints are fine, but except that the enforcement is so draconian that it's just too much for me, and I don't understand. Like, I haven't seen really like a lot of issues with the speed, even if it was at 45. I don't see a ton of construction happening on the PCH where that would endanger anybody, and I feel like we also, like, honestly, like with everything that we've had, like really like the kind of police force that we're seeing in Malibu and Palisades is the kind of police force I'd like to see more in downtown LA, taking care of real problems. We can have a checkpoint or two, like to prevent looting and all that stuff, and I think that can be done. But I think the level that I've seen is a little too high. So as I've said, I'm moving shortly. I'll be traveling in Europe this summer with family. Decided to use the opportunity for the summer break to basically take the family nomad a little bit. Destinations are all over Europe, plus hopefully a stop in Israel at the end if things calm down, and maybe Iran. Who knows?
I'll be joining you there, Ron. I think that I'd put a bet on that now. Get tickets now while they're cheap.
Wow.
if they're available. Ironically, the only route that is flying right now is Tel Aviv, Tehran, as somebody said on X, and that is, all the other airlines out of Israel are not flying. This is the only route going. So
You need to fly the Israeli Air Force to Tehran. Well, I hear the food's pretty good. How about you, Oren? What's happening in your end?
Nothing. We're getting ready to move out of Malibu. I think it's our last few days in Malibu. We're moving to Agora, which we're very excited about. Hopefully, everything, the move will be great for the kids, great for us. Can't wait to start rebuilding in Malibu. Although again, I'm not on the optimistic side over here. But let's see. I really hope that like in 2-3 years we can start heading back and building, finish to building our houses. That's it. No Iran plans for me this summer.
No Iran. I helped somebody move to Malibu last week, and I have to say, now this was up in the hills, not by the coast, but when I was up there, everything was green. You didn't see any evidence of the fire. The air was clear. And for a moment, I had this feeling like, wow, this is California again. I mean, this is what I remember. This is what it felt like until January 7th. And it was so nice for half an hour at least to spend an afternoon in the golden sunshine with the beautiful green mountains and the sounds of birds and children playing, and it was actually incredible, and hopefully we can have that back again.
Yeah, and the bears, did you see the other video of the bears?
No, I didn't see the bears.
I need to send you. There is a video of the bears. Last time I sent you a picture, I'll send you a video of them.
Oh, that's very cool. Well, let's talk about foreign policy. So, as I mentioned, I was supposed to be in Israel. They are at war with Iran, and there's a lot of bad news and a lot of good news, and it's a very stressful time. I know that given the fact that the three of us have connections to Israel, many of us were very busy following the news over the last several days and up all night looking for news, checking on friends. I was actually in Israel during the first Iranian missile attack in April last year, which was very interesting. And it was the first time Iran had attacked Israel directly, and we woke up the next morning at 5. We didn't really sleep that much during the night because of all the interceptions and explosions and planes flying overhead. And we woke up at 5, or emerged at 5, and the feeling was complete euphoria because we had survived this thing that was kind of a nightmare in the collective Israeli, Jewish, Western imagination. And it was like that scene in Pulp Fiction where the two lead actors, Samuel L. Jackson and John Travolta, they've just been shot at. You know, some guy comes out of a back room and shoots at them and misses, every single bullet misses, and they look at each other like, oh my gosh, we're still here. And then they kill that guy. Well, that part I didn't experience, but just the part of looking down at yourself and realizing you're still here, it's totally euphoric. There's nothing like it in the world. I wouldn't want to live through it again necessarily, although I do sort of wish that I'd been in Israel to experience this incredible turnaround of events. But I know something of what it's like, and we are witnessing history because I do think, and I'll be interested in what our guest says and what you guys say, but I do think that this is the beginning of the end of the war, and not just the war that started on October 7th, but really the long war that Iran has fought against Israel for so long. But I want to just play this one clip, Oren, if we can bring it up. Before you play it, I'll explain it. So a lot of people got stranded in Israel. I have friends who are Israeli journalists who were outside of the country. They couldn't get back into Israel. You can imagine how frustrating that is if you're a journalist who's Israeli and you can't cover the war because you're stuck overseas. But also there were people stuck in Israel, and there were hundreds of kids on these birthright trips that Jewish kids go on, and they were stranded in Israel, unable to leave because they shut down Ben Gurion Airport. They moved all the civilian aircraft to Cyprus. And so people had to take boats from Israel to Cyprus to get on planes. Sometimes they were fishing boats, sometimes tugboats. These kids from Birthright somehow got a cruise ship. I have to play this. This is the most Israel thing ever. You have to see this clip of the stranded kids, these poor kids, going from Israel to Cyprus.
Oh my God.
That's the war. That's the war in the Middle East. So
I want to be on that birthright trip. Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Joel, can I? It's actually can I react to that because there's something that's really powerful.
I'll introduce you. Yeah.
You introduce me and then I'll react because that actually is really powerful.
All right. So Nathan Miller, or Nate, is a neighbor of mine, and he lives over in, I guess, what we call the Las Casas neighborhood. I guess it's Las Pulgas Canyon. Basically, you're above there, and you've been a presence in the community for a long time. When I first moved in, people said, "Oh, if you're interested in these issues like Israel and foreign policy, you've got to talk to Nate." And you are the CEO of MillerInk, which is a strategic and crisis communications firm based in Santa Monica. But before that, you were also the director of speechwriting for Israel's permanent mission to the United Nations. You were a senior communications advisor and chief speechwriter for Israeli Ambassador Ron Prosor. And that was in a very tough period around the time of the Iran deal back in 2013, I guess, 2013, 2014, 2015, right? That's when they signed it.
I was there 2010 to 2013, but yes, that was the beginning of that. It was emerging, yeah.
Okay, so you were also the policy director for the Homeland Security Advisory Council, and you were a Goldman Fellow at the Transatlantic Institute in Brussels, Belgium. Wow, okay. So clearly a man of great international experience and a local, a resident, a neighbor. You know, we have this incredible talent pool in the Palisades. You can find just about anybody in any field, and you can find experts and celebrities and key players, and you're one of them. So with that great introduction, why don't you give us your reaction to that cruise ship of American 20-somethings having a great time escaping the war zone?
Well, first of all, I'm going to bring Joel Pollock on every podcast with me to introduce me. I appreciate that. I'll tell you something. I went on birthright when I was 18 years old. I had an Israeli roommate in college. And I was always kind of a Zionist, but it was never a really big focus for me. And that trip totally changed my life. And I spent really since then, I just turned 40. So the last 22 years I've spent working on this issue in one way or another, in a big way. Had a profound impact to go to Israel for a month and be with other young people and soldiers and see it. So for those kids, I have to imagine that'll be something it's an iconic moment. I was thinking today, it's funny before you brought the clip up, when I heard they got the cruise ship, I was just thinking, I can imagine being on the cruise ship and all these 18 to whatever 25-year-olds, partying or whatever. There's like, it's such a sense of pride and resilience and strength that I find that really touching. And I know for me, that trip, when you go to Israel and you experience it and you understand what it is and who the people are, it changes you. I think it changes everyone, but particularly if you're Jewish, I think it particularly changes you. And I think there's something really important. And I think this moment, this is our 67 moment, but even that doesn't even put it into context. I think it's even bigger than that in a lot of ways. I've been working on this issue of the Iranian nuclear program really since 2005. When I was in Brussels, I was working on Iran sanctions there with the EU institutions. At the time, after the Iraq War, Iran had given up its nuclear program temporarily, but there was a lot of other dual-use items that they were still trying to collect through Europe. And I worked at a think tank in Brussels working on, helping to monitor and look at violations of sanctions that were rampant in the European Union at the time. Everybody, basically, it was in name only. And then at the UN, from 2010 to 2013, there was another round of sanctions that they put on through the Security Council. We worked very actively on that. And so anyways, I've just watched this issue for years and years. And this was always the scenario that everybody kind of thought about, imagined, but it was really fantasy. And now to see it, it's just, to see the Israeli competence. I'll say one more thing. Sorry, Joel, I want to get reactions, but one more thing. I'll just say, after October 7th, it was such really so profoundly traumatic, I'm sure, for everyone on this call, in this podcast. I remember sitting in my office 3 days out with someone from Israel who was a pretty senior person, and they said, I know it feels like we've been punched in the face, but we've been sucker punched. And that person predicted, he said, you'll see, in the coming years, the destruction of Hamas, the destruction of Hezbollah, and ultimately the destruction of the Iranian nuclear program. And this was like on October 10th, 2023. And I thought that seemed really like, unlikely at that point. And it shows that I was totally wrong. And, so it's for me, like, there's something very prophetic and moving to see what's happened.
Well, as we are talking today, this is Tuesday, June 17th, and a few hours ago, President Donald Trump posted on Truth Social, unconditional surrender. And I felt that Monday, June 16th, was something of a turning point. I mean, the momentum had been in Israel's favor since the start of the attacks. Somehow Israel managed to surprise the Iranians. The Iranians, as you said, Nate, this has been something people have discussed for 2 decades, the idea of a preemptive strike on Iran's nuclear facilities. Somehow the Iranians didn't anticipate the timing or the way that Israel did it, and they managed to take the regime by surprise. So the momentum has been in Israel's favor from the beginning. But on Monday, the Iranians had promised massive barrages of missiles, and they didn't really materialize. There were maybe a few different barrages of a few different missiles. It tells you that the Israeli Air Force is taking out a lot of the launchers for the missiles. And the Israeli Air Force started operating completely freely over the skies of Iran, taking out military targets, even institutions of the government of Iran. So it does feel as though Iran is near a kind of institutional collapse, at least of the government. And that's something very interesting to people in LA. We have a massive Persian or Iranian population, many people from different faiths. There are Muslims, Baha'i, Jews, Zoroastrians, and many favorable toward the Iranian opposition. In fact, I think some of the Iranian opposition TV channels are based in LA. And it's a big part of our community. Many of our neighbors, our friends, left after the revolution because of the repressive practices of the Iranian regime. So we're sitting here watching this happen. By the time we put this podcast out, even if it's just an hour or two from now, things could have changed dramatically. But it really does feel that something unique happened here. And I want to ask Oren about it, because Oren, I think, of the 4 of us right now, although I don't know if you were in Israel recently, but Oren was there very recently. Again, I was supposed to be there this week. But Oren, what's your reaction to all this? I mean, was this something that Israelis anticipated? Was this something that people thought might happen to end the war? Or were people thinking that there might be a deal? Trump kept talking about wanting to do a deal, which was concerning because it looked like it could be like Obama's deal, which was very weak. I think we talked about it at one point. You asked me if I thought Trump was giving too much to Iran, and I said, well, let's just wait and see. What was your sense in Israel?
No, so first of all, what I ask you is, do you think that Bibi is going to really attack Iran? And you said, most definitely he will. I didn't think so. Okay. I'll be honest with you. I didn't think so. And I think that the problem, not the problem, but what I got in Israel, and I'm talking to my family every day, to my friends over there, I don't think people were like so concentrated in the war in Gaza and were so depressed by the war in Gaza that I think you always like as looking at the next blockage. You're not looking at like the horizon and looking at the Iran issue. And again, on top of it, to see that the deal is starting and we're going to go back to the Obama deal more or less. It wasn't like nobody was happy about it because again, Iran, and it's hard to even say Iran because I think like that most Iranians that I know, I have 3 people that are Muslim Iranians that work with me over here. I asked one of them yesterday, how many you think of like all the Iranians are like supporting the regime? They said if it's 20%, we'll be surprised. 20% of the people, and that's why it's hard for me to say that Iran, but like I think that people really were looking at Gaza, looking at like the Iran deal that nobody was happy about that is going to happen because the best it could achieve for us is another like few years of not really knowing what they're planning on, what they're building or what they're going to do. The one thing we know is that they want to destroy us. This is like a regime that since day one that they came in, they said, oh, we're coming in and we want to destroy. That's their goal. This is one of the richest countries in the world. I think that they're like they're number 3 in the world with like their oil. the amount of oil that they have. This could be like very easily Saudi Arabia or like Dubai or something like this, and all the money that they spend in the last few years on Hezbollah, on Hamas, on their missiles. That's it. Israeli destroyed it in the last since October 7 until today. And I think that people today listen, the bombing that is happening right now in Israel, it's crazy. We've never seen like this. I lived in the in the bombing of I was a teenager when Iraq was bombing Israel. Nothing is like this. When a 500 kilogram blows up in your neighborhood, the whole neighborhood is like destroyed. It's insane. It's scarier than the fire that we had. In the fire, we had enough time. We could leave. We could pick up our things. Over here, every time there is an alarm, I'm on the phone with my mom, making sure she woke up, making sure she went to the, how do you call it, to the safe...
the safe room.
Yeah, to the safe room. So, hopefully this thing will be done. And last thing, I think that Trump played it amazingly. Ron told me yesterday, Trump need to get like the Oscar for this. The way he played it, holding all the cards to him. Nobody really know how he's going to react. I'm surprised. I'm really happy with the results so far.
Well, Ron, let me get your take on it, and then I'll give you guys a unique perspective from the kind of work I do, which might be surprising in terms of what people are thinking in my world. But go ahead, Ron.
Yeah, no, I'd like to frame it a little bit from a local perspective. Many of our listeners, they're not really tied into this topic maybe on a day-to-day basis, and the thinking is like, why should we care? Well, first of all, we have a massive diaspora of Iranian people, as you mentioned. I think 500 to 700,000 Iranians or former Iranians of Iranian heritage in the LA area alone. 7 million worldwide. It's a massive diaspora. It's many of the people that are friends and associates, close associates, come from Iran, or their families came from Iran. They've been wanting to go back for a long time, couldn't, obviously, because of the regime. Were kicked out initially in the 70s. I've been in LA since. And a lot of folks not have to be Jewish or local to ask. Have asked me over the last couple of weeks, how is this important? Why should we care? And maybe we can just touch on that and level set the conflict and what's happened. Basically, Iran has been threatening not just Israel but also the U.S. for many years with destruction. And the plan was to go after Israel first, which is the little Satan, U.S., which is the big Satan, and basically get rid of them both with a very jihadist and kind of a nihilistic view of the world. What's been going on in the last few weeks, I think, is nothing short of remarkable, because there was this narrative for many years that Iran is this massive regional tiger that's about to unleash, and has by the way a military that is larger than Israel's in both human body count, but also in the amount of weapons that it has. But basically, Israel just went in and essentially in the last 5 days decapitated the head very quickly, making it almost impotent as we speak, taking out a lot of the depth of what it was capable of doing. And the reason we should care about that on a local level, it doesn't matter where you come from, is because this was a direct threat not to just Israel but also the U.S. I think there's also a larger geopolitical play here as well. Iran was in the middle of this China, Iran, Russia axis. They were the link in the middle, and if we can disentangle them, create an Iran that is hopefully a free state and a democracy, which I think is possible because they do have those roots of democracy, and because the majority of the population supports that, we can essentially disentangle that part of the world from terrorism. And Iran has been operating with just so many proxies of terror over the last few years: Iraq, Syria, Yemen, just multiple proxies of terror. I think if Trump can push the final domino, that would be incredible for the region, for America, for the world. And let me just say this: as we air, we still don't know what Trump is going to do. He hasn't said, but I do feel like it's an incredible political gambit that he's made here. Basically, Israel has de-risked a lot of this over the last 5 days or so, and even since last year when the first initial missile attack came from Iran, Israel went ahead and basically decapitated a lot of the anti-missile capabilities of Iran last year, and it continued to do so over the last 5 days. I think just from a Trump perspective and a USA perspective, a lot of this has been de-risked because now it's basically, if Trump does decide to push in the final chips, go after the final what they say is an impenetrable nuclear facility, it would be at a lot less risk of putting boots on the ground and really going for the jugular here and this last stroke. And I think it's been again, to echo what Oren said, brilliant play so far by Trump and the administration.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. So where I am in the conservative media, the right of center world, there's been a debate that has been a little bit surprising over whether the United States should enter this conflict. And we've been used to debates on the left with people who don't want the United States to support Israel, and of course all of the craziness on college campuses and in certain American cities, and people who want to destroy Israel, and in a softer sense, people who simply want to pressure Israel. And then you have the record of the last two Democratic administrations in taking a soft approach toward Iran. And that is a familiar debate, but this debate on the right is new. And there seems to be a split. I don't think it's actually statistically or numerically a very large split. It's not a split down the middle, but there is a faction that has emerged that has decided that President Trump's foreign policy cannot involve any kind of entanglement in foreign wars. Now, that's not something Trump himself has ever said. He has said he will end foreign wars, what people call forever wars. And of course, the war in Ukraine has become deeply unpopular on the right in the United States for a variety of reasons. There's some bleed over from that debate into the debate about Israel. And you have people saying that the United States either should not support Israel against Iran, let Israel do it on its own, quote unquote, or should not enter a war against Iran on its own. There's different data depending on how you ask the question. Some polls say the United States should use military force to prevent Iran from achieving a nuclear weapon. Others say the United States should not. So it seems to have been sort of confusing to people, I think. And as this war started, or as I said earlier, as this stage of the war started, because of course Iran has been at war with Israel and the United States for many years, and of course October 7th was in many ways an Iranian attack, Hamas being funded and armed by Iran. This is a debate where people on the right who support President Trump, some of them, are desperate to make sure that he does not decide to involve the United States directly in the war. Now, it's a bit of a strange boundary to try to draw, because if we have aircraft carriers in the Middle East, and if we have missile defense systems on our Navy ships that are helping to defend Israel, and if we're supplying weapons to Israel, how are we not involved? Well, okay, but you could say that's indirect. What they really don't want is boots on the ground. They don't want American soldiers going into Iran. And when I've talked to people with that point of view, I've said, well, this isn't really going to be like Iraq. No one ever talks about this the way they talked about Iraq. This is not the United States going in and knocking over a government and trying to set up an alternative. People have confidence in the Iranian people to figure that out. This would be an air war, if it were a war at all, involving the United States. In fact, it's just the idea of striking the nuclear program. And people don't want to accept that. And so it's been interesting. On the first day of the war, on Friday, June 13th, I had this incredible argument with somebody who I have a lot of respect for and who I normally get along with, somebody who is on the conservative side, who was just absolutely adamant that the United States could not be involved in any way in this conflict whatsoever. And this person is not anti-Israel, they're not anti-Semitic, they're none of that. They're just committed to the idea 100% that the United States should not be involved in any foreign wars, and that this was something Trump, if he didn't promise it explicitly, what people thought they were getting from Trump when they voted for him. I do think there's some segment of the Trump base that was motivated, maybe a younger voting segment, because this person who I was talking to had come of age during the anti-war movement around the Iraq War. And so that was their political formation. They had even been on the left a little bit initially because Obama and the Democrats were anti-Iraq war. This person now votes Republican because he feels that Republicans are the anti-war party. So it's very important to this person. But to me, it's just a little bit strange. And it's been difficult to navigate. One final point about this. If you look at Tucker Carlson, who's a leading voice on the right in the new media world, he was very anti-Iran 10, 15 years ago, and now is at odds with President Trump over American support for Israel, never mind America's potential role in this conflict. And that does tell you something about how the debate has changed on the conservative side. I don't think that the isolationist wing, for lack of a better word, is even close to half of Republican voters, but it is dominant on social media. And so this is all very weird. And the one thing I said to my friend before the conflict actually started, because when it looked like Israel might attack Iran, our argument had already begun. I said, what will you do if Israel does strike Iran and it's successful? And there was no real answer, because I just don't think that even the serious people on that side of the argument, the ones not motivated by prejudice or weird conspiracy theories, but even the serious people just couldn't imagine that Israel would pull it off. They knew about the pager attacks in Lebanon against Hezbollah. They knew about the astonishing hostage rescues in Gaza. They knew about all that, but somehow people just didn't think that Israel could pull it off in Iran. And I just had the sense that it was going to take something special to win in Iran, and Israel wasn't going to go to war in Iran without something very special planned. I actually didn't think they were going to attack last week. I thought Trump was moving people out of our embassies almost as a negotiating tactic, so I was wrong about that, even if Oren, I was right about Netanyahu attacking eventually. But it's been interesting for me to confront people both on the left and now on the right who are so opposed to this. And I understand some of them have sincere feelings about it. I also think a lot of people just aren't very well informed. And then there are some people who just have become hateful for whatever reason. And I can't explain it. I can't explain what happened to Tucker Carlson. I have my own theories. Not that I spend a lot of time thinking about it, but I think that we are in a weird place politically in the debate around this issue. Go for it, Nathan.
I think, yeah. So listen, I have to say, one of the things that, like all of you, I've been very concerned about, folks in Israel through this moment. But one of the things that I've been very heartened by is watching how this debate has played out. I've been increasingly concerned about this function on, this group of people on the right. And Joel, I think I've even texted you, just like that. There's sometimes you see people saying things that would have been unimaginable. I lived in Washington in 2006. It's very much a different conservative coalition. I tell my clients all the time, that X is not real life, right? And that I think there is a lot of this. It's a function of the loudest voices, sort of the way that social media works, have amplified this kind of segment on the right. When you look at all the polling, as you said, I think like seeing Trump publicly rebuke Tucker Carlson, seeing a lot of polls coming out that show overwhelming support within the Republican coalition for this attack, I think that's really important. I was concerned over the last 6 months that what we're starting to see on the right is what we saw on the left 10, 15 years ago that has emerged into a really strong, force. I will say it's a quirk of this moment that I do think there's a lot of fake news, paid, pundits, fake groups that have been set up, like, by the Iranian regime, frankly, in the United States, that had driven a lot of this too. and a lot of these folks, we could talk about that, and maybe that's not the subject of this conversation, but
Well, yeah,
I
I
think
actually
that
want to hear about that. I mean, do you know about that? I mean, some of these people, have they been changed in their opinions because of money coming in from various
I
foreign
think there's
donors?
absolutely, yeah. Listen, I've been very outspoken about the influence of Qatari money in the United States. Qatar actually funded, to take it back to the Palisades. There was a curriculum that was brought into K through 12 schools around ethnic studies that was funded by the Qatar Foundation, where they actually created curriculum that was pretty anti-Semitic and crazy. And
In the
they've been very
Palisades?
active.
That was going to come into the
Well, I
Palisades?
mean, it was going to come into every California school, so it includes
Wow.
the Palisades, absolutely. There was a great story. Jay Solomon had a great story in the Free Press about Qatari influence, and I've seen it up close from my work for years. The Iranians also are very sophisticated. They have a group in Washington D.C. called NIAC, where they have shills for the regime. And I think there's been a kind of Pat Buchanan wing of the Republican Party connected. There's this sort of like this fringe that's been reasonably well funded and has been sympathetic to this idea. But the question that I always ask folks, like, if you're anti-war, Iran with a nuclear weapon is, and the knock-on effects of all of what that would mean are so much more frightening than anything else. And nobody has an answer. If Iran gets a weapon, the Saudis get a weapon, the Turks get a weapon, and so on and so on. And eventually a terrorist gets a weapon and there's a nuclear umbrella, and the world is going to have much less war today because of this action. It was unbelievably surgical when you think about it. And there's not really an answer on that side of the equation. But I do think that there's something perilous about this political moment we're in, where you do have the decline of legacy institutions in many ways, traditional media outlets, and you have all these kind of people, and there's a lot of grifters who are around the margin, a lot of grifters who are for sale for really, and in some cases really bad ideas. And I think Tucker certainly I would count among that group, but there's a lot of others like him, and so that to me is I feel like I was almost like, even I work in this field and I should know better, but I was kind of believing what I was seeing. You go on Twitter and you see sort of how the debate is playing out, and you get really concerned. And I've been really heartened by this week to see that, I actually think the energy and the momentum and the, is still largely on our side within the conservative coalition, which is important. And, and I think it's important for people to be making the case. Again, I've just seen a lot of people being a lot more public in opposition to this kind of paleo-conservative, whatever you want to call it, isolationist, America-only view that I think is really, really dangerous for the United States.
Yeah, it's interesting. Go ahead, Oren.
Yeah, I just want to add to this. Like, obviously, I'm Israeli. I'm all in for the U.S. to come and support us. But I also think that as Israelis, it's important for us that our boots will be on the ground. We want to fight our fights, And I know that a lot of Israelis think the same. Like the fact that the U.S. is basically supporting us, it's amazing. And I really think that Trump played it great. Trump did both worlds have won. Trump didn't jump into it. He let Israel take care of her enemies, which is important for us, not just for now, but also for the future, to show that we can stand against our enemies. We stood against our enemies in all the wars. Nobody nobody really helped the Jews in the Holocaust until the end of it. In all our wars, we were the one that were fighting it. And if you ask me, I think that Trump is right to say America first. I'm an American right now, and my neighbor Joe. Why do he need to risk his kids' life over there? The fact that now we almost finished everything over there, and if the Moab is the only thing that can finish this war, and that's what it will take, by all means, yes. But in terms of like boots on the ground, I kind of agree with this.
I think also like Israel doesn't really ask for that. That's the thing. It's like
Right.
let's demystify this whole, American involvement, and which I'm actually like opposed. I think Israel has got this very well covered. The only thing that they've asked for really is like weaponry that they don't have access to. But I don't think Israel's ever asked for boots on the ground. I think it's a great winning stroke from Trump to come in now. And if I was to use a sports analogy, he's coming in. He's asking for an isolation basketball play to take the winning shot here at the end, and he's going to dunk over whoever is left from the losing team, which is what it's going to happen. I'm making a prediction here that I hope I'm not demystified on, but he's going to take that winning shot, and everybody's going to be like, "Yay, America! Happy times! Winning shot! Trump, world peace, Nobel Prize, Oscar Prize, whatever you want to say." But I think that's what's going to happen here. But Israelis are not asking for American boots on the ground. I actually think that they've got this very well covered on their own, as they've very much proven in the first 5 days. And me as an American, I actually, some part of me hopes that aside from just the weapon stuff, that America doesn't come in on this, because I don't think Israel needs it. I think this is I think what might be needed if you want total regime change is for somebody like a Trump to come in and say, "Hey, you know what? The Iranian people, we have your back, and go out to the streets, and then the mullahs have to go." But I don't think that Israel needs the help at this point, aside from the weapons itself.
It's totally right. By the way, I totally agree with what you both said. I want to say something that's been a fascinating data point that I've seen, and I agree. Israel has shown itself very capable here. I think we're going to be entering a new moment, almost a unipolar moment for Israel in the region. I mean, it's just like total 180 from where we were after October 7th in many ways, in terms of its strength and prestige. And I think it's, certainly in the region, but around the world, people want a winner and they want a strong horse. If you want proof of that, look at the Israeli stock market over the last week. It's gone up. Probably in the first time in the history of a war like this. But it shows you that people understand the capabilities of this country. It's remarkable what it accomplished. And people, if they're betting on its future, I would invest in Israel today.
The shekel is at the highest level since October 2023. It's at 3.5 to the dollar, which is pretty strong. Usually it's about 4. So 3.5 to the dollar. And then, this is the amazing thing about Israelis. I saw we showed the clip of the Americans leaving on the cruise ship for Cyprus, having a good time. But there are so many Israelis trying to get back into the country. Israel is probably the only country in the world where people go towards the war rather than away from the war. And it is remarkable. Some of the other videos we've been seeing on social media of singing.
150,000 Israelis are trying to go back to Israel.
Yeah. Yes, please let us get back into the bomb shelters and front lines. Yeah. I mean, it's amazing. I have a Chabad rabbi friend here in the Chicago area, and his son took a different path rather than becoming a Chabad rabbi like his dad, which is usually the path that many choose. He became a soldier in the IDF, and he posted a video of himself driving to his reserve duty, singing, and everybody's happy to be in this fight. Now, there is a trauma, and I have friends I'm talking to, some joke about it. I have an aunt who lives in the Haifa area who's coming out here to Chicago in a couple of weeks for a wedding. My cousin's getting married over July 4th weekend. She says, "I don't need to see the fireworks show this year. I've seen enough." That's what she said. But, I have other friends who have small children, and they're not sleeping at night because the Iranians pretty much only fire at night because they want to keep the missile launchers out of view. So they only fire at night. They keep the entire population up at night, so nobody's sleeping. And you can have fun for short stretches, but then the exhaustion sets in. And with that comes the trauma. And as Oren said, these are different blasts. I mean, I've experienced the rocket fire from Gaza, and I've experienced the missile fire from Iran, but I wasn't in Israel when any missiles actually hit from Iran. And the shockwave, even if you're not in a building that's directly hit, the shockwave does destroy a lot of things. It actually damaged the U.S. Embassy Annex in Tel Aviv, and it's traumatic. And I had to, in a way, counsel a friend of mine who was saying that this is crazy. How did this happen? And this is a person who always has a sense of the big picture, but you just get a sense that people are emotionally really frayed by this. and they want to fight and they want to win. They're still in it, but it does take an emotional toll, especially if you have kids who you have to wake up. And in some of these buildings, especially in Jerusalem, the shelters aren't that good. It's not so easy to get into a safe room. They have to go next door, or they're not really sure that their building is going to withstand an impact. So it's very, very difficult. And you have to remind them, look, this is really the end. I mean, this is what people were saying almost for the entire October 7th war, that Iran is really the heart of all this. Trump sort of hinted at it a few months ago, but when he was talking about the Houthi missiles, saying, look, what the Houthis do is basically what Iran wants them to do, so we're going to start holding Iran accountable. A lot of people have been saying this for a while. With all of the suffering of the Palestinians in Gaza and so forth, why not just focus on Iran? Iran is the cause of all this. They're funding it, they're arming it, and so forth. So I think that there's a huge toll that's being paid, and I do think that it's something where we, even though we're not there, those of us on the outside can sometimes provide a sense of perspective. And the perspective here is that Iran has been, or the Iranian regime, we always want to distinguish between the Iranian regime, especially in this case, between the government and the people. But the Iranian regime has been funding and arming so many of these terror groups that I think once it doesn't do that anymore, whether the regime changes or it just agrees not to do it anymore, I think it's going to change life dramatically in the Middle East. Like Oren said, it could be the next Saudi Arabia. It could be a prosperous society. And, the LA to Tehran flights are going to get pretty full pretty quickly with people shopping back and forth.
100%. Before the revolution, there was like so much, how do you call it, work that was happening, and tourism that was happening between Iran and Israel. And again, I have like so many Iranian friends. We like the two nations are like really connected, and I think that it's very easy to see it right now. With whatever is happening in Iran, Israel would never be able to do it without having like a lot of help from inside. A lot. So I don't believe that like when we're saying Mossad, it's not like Rafi and David, Israeli guys that moved to live in Tehran in Iran. No, those are people that live over there. Those are people that like cannot wait to liberate their country. And when they did the revolution in after the Shah, the reason why they did the revolution is not because they wanted it to be like religious. The Khomeini just like joined the revolution as part of the left, and everybody was against the Shah. So great, and he's the one that took power. So the Iranian people are amazing. That's why we need to change the way we talk about it. We don't have a fight with Iran. We have a fight with the regime that took over Iran.
Yeah, and who knows what's coming next? I mean, there could be the return of the Shah's family, maybe some kind of constitutional democracy. I have no idea. But, I think that the Iranian people have so much potential. There's so much skill, so much tradition, so much entrepreneurship. I mean, it's incredible. So I think the region is looking forward to some very good things. And this idea of a trade corridor from India to Europe across the Middle East, which Netanyahu talked about, Trump talked about, and even some people in the Biden administration seem to be talking about. I think that that's something that could be incredible for the region. But we'll have to see. I mean, as we're speaking now, we don't know what the outcome of all this is going to be. And I don't know what the political fallout is going to be either. I do think that most Americans are watching this, glad that Israel is taking the initiative, glad that Israel is succeeding, and yet hoping that there aren't consequences. We still don't know what they'll be, if any. I mean, look, the Iranian regime seems to be on the last ropes, but who knows? Maybe Ron, I don't know. Do you think they have some tricks up their sleeves? Do you think they can pull something out?
I mean, they certainly talk a big game because they say they have a trick up their sleeve every few hours, and they say they send threats. But like as we've seen in past wars in that part of the world, there's an internal audience and an external audience. The internal audience, they're shut off from the outside world. The internet is down in Iran. They're trying to broadcast to their people a very strong hand. We're going to do this and that. And so far that hasn't materialized. I hope that remains true. There is one more, just on Oren's point, there was one more parallel I'd like to make here. And I know, we're talking about like, how does this relate to the local scene? The Iranian Revolution started out, with this started out on college campuses, and then you had like folks coming in with this like very nihilistic, insane worldview that is aiming to destroy America, destroy Israel, destroy Western values, and has basically held Iran hostage for 47 years. I see a very clear parallel to what's happening or what happened in Iran to the college campuses here today, here in America, where you have like this like very crazy agenda on demonstration everywhere, and it seems to be. And I think that we should draw some parallels, maybe to those who don't live and breathe this conflict every day and like don't follow the news as much. The college campus kind of like insane demonstration that I think we've seen and are hopefully going to go away. I see a direct parallel to that kind of like spirit to what we saw here.
I think to draw another parallel, and I think this is actually something really important, something that brings me a lot of concern, especially when this broke out. This is a regime that it's proven that it doesn't have the competence to fight fair, square to square against Israel. Really, it can fire missiles at civilians, but it doesn't do conventional kinetic warfare well. What it does is it finds soft targets. When I served in the Israeli government, I got in the ambassador's car almost every day, and and it took about 30 minutes for his security to check the car before we got in. But during the time that I was there, the Iranians blew up 3 Israeli diplomatic cars from 2010 to 2013. They bombed the Jewish community center in Buenos Aires. They planned to bomb a restaurant in DC targeting the Saudi ambassador. They have sleeper cells all over the world. They actually there was a project called the Mapping Project in Boston that was publicly listing all of these potential targets for, and was known to be an Iranian project. It included U.S. Homeland Security installations and also prominent Jewish institutions here. So I think the Jewish community locally, everywhere, has to be very vigilant now. We are at threat. And I think the Iranians, if the U.S. gets involved, they have sleeper cells all over the world that could get activated, and that's something that I think, just for the local angle, not to end on that kind of downer, but I think it's something that we really have to be vigilant about and know that this is definitely within the capabilities and the modus operandi of the regime.
Well, just completely agree with you. As something I've been thinking about very deeply the last couple of weeks, because I'm about to spend the summer in Europe, in various locations, and I know that that's like a very plausible like target, like the soft targets in Europe. The Iranians, it's known to have sleeper cells all over, and I do expect something of that. Should they even be on the map in a few weeks? Hopefully, they can be eliminated pretty quickly. But if it's a more longer protracted fight, I 100% agree that they'll activate this.
So just to comment on that quickly, where I am right now in suburban Chicago, I'm in an Orthodox Jewish neighborhood where I grew up. It's become more Orthodox over the years, but also it's become more Muslim. And in the synagogue I went to last Saturday, the synagogue basically is part of a plaza on a main road, and one of the other storefronts in the plaza is a Muslim daycare. So you've got this Chabad synagogue sharing space essentially with this Muslim daycare, and everybody gets along. I mean, if you go to the park here on a Saturday, you've got the yeshiva boys in their kippot and their tzitzit playing basketball, and then the Muslim women in their hijabs with their little kids running around. America is an amazing country, and you do find scenes like that in Israel, not everywhere, but I do think that given how intertwined our lives have become, it is something that is in the back of people's minds. I don't know how many people who are anti-Israel because of the Palestinians have any sort of empathy for the Iranians. I mean, there could be some distinction there. I don't really see people taking to the streets with Iranian flags the way you do with Palestinian flags or whatever. But Nate, to get back to a point that I think I was trying to get to before, but it slipped away from me. But talking to friends in Israel who've been through bomb shelters and who were traumatized, I said, one of the things I learned from the Palisades fire, just looking at it and going back to the wreckage over and over and over again, before I left town last week, I was there a lot. And when you look at what we've been through, it's not the same as being bombed, okay? But we've lived through this incredibly destructive period. And I feel pretty adamant about the idea that when things collapse, material things, physical things, your homes, your possessions, those sorts of things, it's terribly traumatic, but you can rebuild, and it doesn't defeat you. It's also not the worst thing that can happen to you. I know this is a really tough thing to say and maybe controversial, but I that thought came to mind because in having these arguments and debates with people on the right side of the aisle, the conservative movement and whatever, people who were getting alarmist, who didn't want the United States involved, and so they were sort of hyping up every Iranian missile attack as if to say, see, we told you, Israel never should have started this because, look, there are missiles falling on Tel Aviv. How do you like that? This apartment building fell. How do you like that? These people lost their home. And I feel like saying, nobody should lose their home. It's terrible to lose a home. But actually, you survive losing a home. And look, some people didn't survive in some of these missile attacks. But the point is, you realize that life is full of risks. And as someone said earlier, I don't remember who it was, an Iran with a nuclear weapon is a much bigger risk than the war that's happening right now. And some people pointed out, imagine if any of these missiles had nuclear warheads or even chemical warheads. We don't know what Iran's capabilities are there, but imagine if they had those kinds of weapons already. Tel Aviv wouldn't exist anymore. So I felt like saying to these people, obviously you don't want to be the stereotype of, and here I'm going to use all the names and labels they use, you don't want to be the neocon warmonger who wants to send other people to die and burn foreign cities. I mean, you don't want to do that. You don't want to be in that mode where war is cheap and, just suck it up and take a few collapsed apartment buildings and get over it. No, obviously this is very difficult, but there are actually some things worth risking other things for. And I just feel that Americans understand that. I think Palisadians understand that. I think we've been through an experience that very few other communities have. And in a way, it does make it easier for me to understand where Israelis are coming from, where they're traumatized but still fighting on. That was the point I was trying to make earlier.
I think that's a really important point, and I totally agree. I think resilience, going through crazy traumatic things and coming out the other side lets you know that you can do it. That's sort of I think, that's Israel's entire history, and I think part of its secret to success is that there's a sense of resilience, and I think the Palisades is going to come out the other side. I feel that sense of community. I was the only American in a Hebrew-speaking environment for 3 years every day. When you're with Israelis, there is a tremendous sense of community. Part of it is because you have this shared faith, background and sense, but also I think it's born out of like navigating challenges together, and in moments of challenge, you find common ground with other people, and you understand that you can't do things on your own, and you need other people, and I think that's incredibly empowering. The thing I will say about this moment for Israel, I think that's true for the Palisades, and I feel, as crazy as this year has been, having lost my home, I feel so much more connected to my village, my local and my global village, in a different way, and I feel like I'm coming out of the other side of it, and I'm confident that we're going to be stronger, and we figured it out. For Israel, my children are the great grandkids of survivors, and their great grandparents fled into the forest during World War II, and there was no state to protect them, and and I think about what it means today, that this menace that was threatening the entire world, that Iran was months away from getting a nuclear weapon that would have threatened not just Israel, but threatened the United States and threatened everybody. And that there's a Jewish state with an incredible intelligence service and army that was able to stand up and address this problem. That for me that's such a profound idea. And I think that so many people will, I think the Jewish community and beyond it I think there's something really important about what that means. So that's what I take away from this. And I think on our much smaller scale, in the Palisades, I think we're going to come back and we're going to build a better, more, resilient community as a result of the thing that we've confronted.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the next evening around the fire pit in your new backyard, in your new home, with some whiskey.
I'll tell you something funny. Our fire pit survived. I guess that's not so surprising. But the other thing is, we had a big outdoor table. We had a wooden table that seats like 20 people. We built it out there, and it also survived. So we
How
have some
crazy is
some
that?
tie
The
back to
wooden
like,
table survived. Yeah,
you
it's
know, but we're looking forward to having you around the fire pit.
we had so many great evenings where whenever some visiting author or filmmaker came in, we would sit around your fire pit and have whiskey with ice and refreshments and just great people. I'm so glad that
Yeah.
the fire pit survived. I mean, I don't know what you're going to do in terms of landscaping, but if
It's
that's a
not going
skill,
anywhere.
yeah.
The whole architectural plans are going to be built around the fire pit. I've already laid that out.
Oh, it's amazing. Guys, any last thoughts about this? This has been a very quick hour because we're also into this subject. But Oren, do you have any closing thoughts before we go
Yeah,
around?
Nathan,
I guess
you mentioned something about Qatar's supporting, trying to put in like some educational books. I also heard that Qatar is doing something with the LA Police Department. They invested some money on some AI project. And I think a lot of the times we see things that doesn't make sense to us, and we decide to support them because a lot of time other people are supporting them, and we need to take a moment and look at like the big picture, do our own research, and decide, hey, this is something right or this is something wrong. I think that a lot of the topics that we're talking about will come down to who are we going to choose to be our, our next mayor, our in the next elections. Like Joel said, I think last time, it doesn't matter if they're like from the left side or from the right side of the map. We need to choose the right people to help us rebuild over here and make sure that there is no interference of like people that doesn't necessarily want our own good.
I agree.
Yeah, I'll just say before throwing it to Ron and Nate for some final thoughts, I just feel that this issue is important to people for a variety of reasons. Some people don't care at all, and I totally get that. I don't think people need to be as heavily invested in or interested in this issue as I am, but what we've talked about in this discussion reminds me of why I do think it has a broader relevance, which is that I think that the Israeli experiment is a story of the triumph of humanity. And I know that might sound controversial because people have different views on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and so forth. But I think that the reason that Israel has succeeded and the Palestinian movement hasn't is that Israel does not see itself perpetually as victims or only as victims. The Holocaust is an important part of collective memory, but it's not what built Israel and it's not what shapes Israel. What shapes Israel isn't yesterday but tomorrow. And I feel like the Palestinian movement might have a chance now that the fantasy of destroying Israel might be fading with the end finally of the last great big brother who was going to step in and do the dirty work of getting rid of Israel, now that Iran is fading. And now that you have Americans actually on the ground in Gaza giving humanitarian aid to Palestinians without going through the corrupted United Nations, and Nate, I'm sure you have some information about that. But now that there's a chance, think about the future. Don't just think about what you lost, but think about what you're building. And that to me is the relevance. That forward-looking, positive vision of taking traumatic experiences and turning them into productive plans for the future and really transforming yourself in the process from a victim to a victor. And that to me is the relevance of Israel. I think that's why so many people, whether Jewish or non-Jewish, are inspired by Israel and by its stories and by its struggles. And I have my Israeli flag still on the fence at my house. My house is still standing, half the fence burned down, but the side with the Israeli flags on them. I had an American flag over the house. I took it down because of the high wind that day, but the Israeli flags are still on the fence. And I do feel like you don't have to be all in on Israel to at least be inspired by the resilience and the innovation of the Israeli people as they confront one new challenge after another. So that's my feeling about why it's relevant to us in the Palisades.
Yeah, and just on the leadership angle, Joel, and how we tie it to the local leadership, what you're seeing right now is just basically leadership that has been, whether you like Bibi or not, this plan or what's been transpired over the last 5 days has been thought of for the last 20 years. This is BB's life work. He planned for this day. Everything that you're seeing day by day is planned out. You're not seeing ad hoc bombings of like random things. There's a target bank. The whole decapitation of the Iranian leadership or the military leadership in the first day, the exercises around it, the taking out the everything is planned out. And when I look at in contrast, the local leadership we had with the fires, everybody knew that there was going to be a massive fire at one point or another. We all knew it. Everybody's been talking about it forever, for so many years, that there's going to be a massive fire that's going to burn through LA. And what are we going to do when that happens? Zero preparation for that day. And so, again, we're seeing the leadership on multiple fronts right now. And at least I'd like our next generation of leaders here locally to draw a page from that book and be prepared for that next fire, which is surely going to come.
Nate, last thoughts?
I just I'm grateful for you guys and for what you're doing to try to rebuild the Palisades and to inspire the community. I think I just feel really hopeful that both Israel, the Middle East, and the Palisades are going to be more vibrant places. I think I would bet on both Israel and the Middle East and the Palisades as good places to invest in the future, because I think that we have reached a really interesting point in history. You never know with anything, but I feel really hopeful. That's how I want to end.
You just gave me an idea. We should invite the new Iranian government to put their consulate in the Palisades. I
love it.
Right in the village, and we can get some really good Persian food. And I know they're likelier to go to like North Beverly Hills or something like that, but maybe we can convince them to invest in the Palisades. Anyway, we'll leave it there. Safe travels and safe moves to everybody moving around the country. This has been Three Homeless Guys. You can find us at threehomelessguys.com. Our email is pod@threehomelessguys.com. Please follow us, recommend us, give us a like if you are watching on YouTube. And until next time, stay strong.
Thanks for listening to Three Homeless Guys. If this episode hit home, please subscribe to our channel. Check out threehomelessguys.com for RSS feeds to your favorite streaming service. Follow us on social and share this with a friend who needs to hear it. Drop us a review or shoot us a message at pod@threehomelessguys.com. We'd love to hear from you. Stay strong, and we'll catch you next time.